Okay, let's take our seats and let's get started on our last session of the evening. The title, Creation, a Major Theme Throughout the Scriptures. Subtitle, What You Can Do to Save Our Youth Without Any Science Background. Wow, good evening. It's good to see so many people. I know it's getting late. Hopefully we will complete this session a little ahead of schedule and get you out a little earlier than you had planned. But before we get started, let me give you a little housekeeping. As you stream this session, you may notice that my hand motions and verbiage may appear to be out of sync with each other. That will be true for the first couple of minutes because of an audio glitch that required those first few minutes to be re-recorded. Just thought I'd mention that so that you're not wondering what's going on. Here's what we plan to do. First, we will do a quick Reader's Digest review of Genesis chapter 1. I know you've all read that chapter, but let's go through it so that we're all on the same page. Next, we will examine the scriptures to see how the creation event is literally an integral part of the entire Bible. Genesis chapter 1 is not just a side issue. These references are so common throughout the scriptures that as we're reading, we usually kind of gloss over them. Then we will move to Genesis chapters 6 through 9 to briefly discuss Noah's flood. Much of the evidence for creation can be found in the geology laid down by the flood. We'll use this flood as our springboard towards the question, what can you do to spread the word without any science background? Okay, so you ready to go? Sound good? Let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. What exactly does the Bible say? Let's go through those. Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 1 through 5. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Light and dark, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Verses 6 through 8. And God made the firmament, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Verses 14 through 19, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Verses 20 through 23, and God said, God created every living creature that moveth in the water, and every winged fowl, and the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Right, very good. Okay, and verses 24 through 31. And God said, let the earth bring forth cattle, creeping thing, and the beast of the earth. And God said, let us make man in our image, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So here we have it. 6 days of creation, no more, no less. And then lastly, day 7 was the day of rest. So let's think about that a little bit as we consider the scriptures. Specifically, how often the creation is mentioned throughout the scriptures. Let's think about this for a little bit. Let's look at our calendar, for example. Where did the year come from? Where'd the year come from? What's that? The earth around the sun, right? Correct, okay. And what about the month? Where did the month come from? The moon. The moon around the earth, right? Okay. And where did the day come from? The rotation of the earth. It's one complete rotation. Nothing new here for you. Okay, that's a cyclical night and day, or as the scripture calls it, a cyclical morning and evening, right? Okay, but here is where we're going to have a little problem. There's something different going on here. What about the week? Where did the week come from? Did it come from the sun?
Did it come from the moon? Maybe the stars. How about the zodiac? Now, where did the week come from? Comes from Genesis chapter 1. That's where the week came from. Are there any other countries in this world that have 7-day weeks? Are there any countries in the world that do not have 7-day weeks? Yeah, I'm told that Russia tried a 10-day for a while. It didn't work very well. Okay? So, and a good summary of it is in Exodus chapter 20. It says, "For in what? In 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested" what? "The 7th day, wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." Okay? So let's look at the scriptures throughout, the creation throughout the scriptures. The week. Okay, now we describe a week as 6 working days, 7 days total, right? Okay, how many times do you think that the week is referenced in the scriptures? 100 to maybe 100 times? Okay. How about 175 times? Okay, now let's put this in. Let's make sure that I'm not tricking anybody here. He says, well, what about 5 days or 4 days, or how about 8 days or 9 days? It could be just coincidence, right? Okay, so if we subtract those out, as an example of what just random days would be, we're still at 165. Okay, it didn't make much difference. All right. How about the word Sabbath? That came from what? The creation week. How many times do you think that is used in scriptures? Thousands. You would think, yeah. Okay, well, that's used nearly 140 times. Okay, I like your thousands better though. Okay, and also, let's see, yeah, Dr. Sherwin mentioned this already. In the beginning, man heard this, saw this, or whatever, right? Or how about since the foundation of the earth, man, did this, that, or the other? How many times do you think that type of wording there is in the scriptures? Yeah, well, actually, just under 24. All right, and actually, that's a specific passage. There could be others that involve multiple passages that are saying the same thing. All right, okay, but that's a specific passage. All right, how many of those passages, or any passages in Scripture, say that, well, after 14 billion years, man did this, that, or the other? Yeah, we can count that on a big zero. Yeah, man's referenced numerous times as being in existence since the beginning of creation. So let's add these numbers up kind of quickly. Those of you who are good mathematicians, Genesis 1, we'll just take that as one, a count of one. The 6-day week, or 7-day week, is referred to over 175 times. The Sabbath, almost 140. The Bible, it indicates man's existed since the beginning of creation. If we add that up, what do we have? No, don't go there yet. How about all the times that the Bible specifically refers to the creation of your hands, your feet, your eyes, animals, trees, etc.? That's over 150 more passages. How many are there total? I don't know. That's how many I counted, and I am absolutely positive that I've missed quite a few. Right? Okay, 150. So now let's add them all up, and what do we have? Over 490. All right? You see what happens when we read through the scriptures, and I'm sure all of you do, right? And you see these creation references in a bigger context of something else that you're reading. But how about if we put them all together into one little chapter here, okay? And you'll see what happens. Over 490, actually over 500, right? Okay? So let me ask you a question. If that account of Genesis 1, which we read on our one of the first slides here, is not what's being referred to in nearly 500 passages, okay, then what other creation event in this book could it possibly be referring to? Oh, okay. Or maybe we'll put it another way. Why would an author of a book, any author of any book, refer to an unknown event nearly 500 times that is contrary to what he had already established? Does that make any sense? Okay, so you see the magnitude of what is in the Scriptures. It's actually a very major theme throughout the Scriptures. It's not just one chapter. It's all through the Scriptures, and there's reasons for it. All right? Here is kind of just a quick reference chart as to how many places that it's being referred to, how many times in each book of the Bible. You'll notice there's some there of the minor prophets. Okay, when I get with them, I'll have them fix that. They're kind of missing, the minor prophets are missing some. We'll have to get them in place, right? Okay, I'm pausing here for the people taking pictures. There you go. Okay, so what do we get? What can we take away from this? Well, there's numerous things, and just to mention a few, which, as we've already talked about this evening, we did not evolve. You did not evolve. As Dwayne Gish would say, there's no such thing as goo to you. It just didn't happen that way. That's not what the Scriptures say. You were created. Everything that you have came from God. Everything you have came from God. You didn't pay for a single thing. It all came from Him. He says, well, wait a minute, I went to the store today. He says, you didn't pay for that thing. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. God gave it all to you. Okay? You know, these lights in the eyes, they're made from like silicon and who knows what else is in those things. Where did silicon come from? Out of the ground. You know, this podium here is made out of metal. Where did metal come from? It came from out of the ground. You know, where did the wood floor come from? It came from trees which grew on the ground. So everything either came out of the ground or that grew on the ground. God gave us all of that, everything, every bit of it. So what did you pay for at the store? You paid for somebody's time to be able to convert it from the natural sources that God created to something that's usable. That's what you're paying for. And where did you get the talents to be able to change that natural resource into this object? Where'd you get those talents? From the Lord, right? Everything came from the Lord, which then tells us what? You are special. You know that, right? Now, we all have our, aggravations, our trials and whatnot. That's how God makes us grow, okay? You are very special, though. Each and every one of you here was designed differently from each other. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses, no matter who you are. Okay? We talk about, we tend to want to worship the greatest basketball or football players or whatever, or actors or whatever. This is their people. We seem to sometimes want to put down people they don't seem to have their whole act together. Maybe they have, what we would refer to as birth defects or something. There's no such thing. God made each and every single person individually for a specific reason. Okay? And God created you to be with Him throughout eternity. That's special. That's super special. And while we are here, before we get to eternity, He chooses to use us to serve His purposes, for His plans, knowing that we're going to mess up. Okay, would you give a project to your children knowing that they're going to mess up? Well, sometimes we do, don't we? Well, God does it with us every day because He knows I'm going to mess up every day. Right? Okay, so that's kind of a quick review of creation in the Scriptures. How about if we go to Noah's flood here just for a short period, because as you see, I'm working to a particular ending here. Another hotly debated topic is this so-called worldwide flood. was it really worldwide, or was it just kind of a local flood in Mesopotamia someplace, which they would say? Okay, well, in the scriptures say in Genesis 7, the waters prevailed exceedingly upon earth. How much? How much is exceedingly? And all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. All of the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. How big of a flood is that if it's covered all of the hills? That's worldwide, is it not? By definition. Okay? And according to Genesis 7 and 8, we often think of this flood as being 40 days, right? No, that's how long it rained. How long was the flood? It lasted 1 year and 10 days. That's a big flood, right? Okay? And then let's research this a little bit more. If we take some passages from Genesis 5, 6, and 7, kind of put these together, we'll find out that it took Noah about 100 years to build that ark. 100 years. All right? So let's think about that for a minute. If this was a local flood, do you think that 100 years is enough time for Noah and his family to have walked out of that region? Why would he need a big boat? Why would God tell him to build a big boat? So here's another aspect of creation. And the reason that I'm going here is because so much of creation can be explained by the evidence that we see that was left over from the flood. Okay? The Genesis flood is mentioned specifically 10 times in the scriptures. And then once again, if you look at larger passages, you'll see that it's referred to much more than that. 3 of those are in the New Testament. And oh, by the way, twice by Jesus himself. Okay, Jesus is God, right? So if Jesus says it, it's either true or Jesus isn't God, right? So we have a real problem here. So, okay, so I am going to give you just a few slides here on some sciences because I want you to take home something that you can use. And just very quickly, numerous vast sedimentary deposits. What's a sedimentary deposit? Well, the word sediment basically is mud, all right? And a sedimentary deposit in this context, that's when that mud has turned to rock. All right, so we're going to talk about that for a minute. We're going to talk about erosion in between these layers, and we're going to talk about, has anybody here ever tried to bend a rock? Oh, wow. I hear you laughing at that. Okay, so let's go through these 3 really quick. Numerous sedimentary deposits, they cover entire continents, okay? Like this particular one. All right, and so let's take a minute. I'm going to show you just like a 40-second clip from a video series called Is Genesis History? All right, I highly recommend this particular video clip for you. And this is Dr. Stephen Austin talking with Dale Taggett, okay?
Well, we have the Sauk mega sequence here, if you will, 1,000 feet of sandstone, shale, limestone that goes continent-wide. There are 4 other big sequence packages of strata that sit above it. Those are also very continuous like this. What we're seeing here is rather representative of the rest of the world. It makes one really question the notion that this all happened because of a small local flood. We're talking about something enormous. The power-moving water was beveling and pulverizing rock, depositing great thicknesses of layers and calling our minds to think about a global flood.
Does that call your mind to a global flood? Did you catch that? He's showing 5 different sedimentary rock that by looking at the chemical properties and constituents of it, you can see that those layers practically span the entire North American continent. And that's not unique to the North American continent. That's true with all of the continents, okay? That they were spread that far. Now let's think about that for a second. The evolutionary story is that was due to the slow and gradual raising and lowering of the oceans. How can the slow and gradual elevation of the oceans transport sediments? In this one case he mentioned that are 1,000 feet deep, thousands of miles. You move sediments by rapid, very rapid, violent motions of water, right? Not from gradual motions. So we have sediments that could have only occurred via enormous catastrophic events. Okay? Well, the next one then is, so evolutionists finally, they caught onto that, and they say, well, yes, each of those was a catastrophic event with millions of years in between the events. Okay? Well, let's think about that for a second. If I kind of draw a line at, you can see the different strata here, right? See these different lines in between the strata? Okay? Well, let's think about there for a second. If at each of these interfaces between strata, if they had been sitting there for millions of years, don't you think there'd be rivers, valleys, major erosion in between, on at these places? And you don't see it. You see nice straight lines. They're pancakes laid right down on top of each other, one right after another. No erosion in between them. And by the way, wouldn't you have trees and animals and whatnot that were living on these? Wouldn't they be leaving, remains back? Of course they would. Okay? And I'm not talking about fossils. That's the other reason that we know that the strata the layers had to have been formed rapidly, is if an animal dies, does it make a fossil? If it's just laying there? It says, no, the critters eat it up. It has to get buried rapidly. All right? So otherwise we wouldn't have fossils. Okay, so there's two. Number three, as I mentioned earlier, have you ever tried to bend a rock? Well, if you do, this is what you're going to see. If the strata itself is bent, that strata is going to break at the interfaces, the horizontal interfaces, and which is horizontal, and it's going to break in the vertical places because it's being twisted. Can you see much of a bend in this rock in front of you? No, not much at all, but that's because it doesn't take much, and that's what's going to happen. Well, how about this one? How many of you have seen this particular place? Yeah, probably quite a few of you. This is just west of Hancock. It's called Sidling Hill. All right, so let's think about that. Everyone, creation or evolutionist, believes that this strata was laid down horizontally at one time. And then later, it was folded into this particular shape. Okay? Well, if it was folded millions of years later, wouldn't these layers have been solidified? And if that's the case, wouldn't they look like the lower picture here, not the upper? Okay, so all of these had to have been laid down together rapidly, one on top of the other, and then folded before they solidified. That is, what did we say that it was? That's a big flood, isn't it? Okay, so now let's talk about why am I so adamant about this particular topic? All right, let's take a typical family here, and next thing you know, a youngster comes home from school and he says, "Sorry, Mom, sorry, Dad, but the Bible isn't true." And Mom and Dad are going to say, "Huh? What? Where did that come from?" This is, we taught you better than that. Okay, well, if it was a young son, you would be able to have some time to work with him, right? And in fact, I just had a phone call from somebody just 3 days ago. This is about my grandson. The person who called said my grandson has been taught, some things that, evolutionary subjects. Is there something that I can do to answer these particular questions? I said, yeah. Okay, but all too often that's not what happens. What happens is the son or daughter or whomever is a lot older. Okay, so we kind of drew some mustache and beard and longer hair, right? Okay, yeah, I had longer hair at one point in time. And he says, "Sorry, Mom, sorry, Dad, but the Bible isn't true." Huh? What's the response going to be now? It's too late, or could be. And why am I so adamant about this particular topic? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Okay? I went home and said, sorry, Mom, sorry, Dad, but Genesis chapter 1's not true. And once you take one chapter out, it gives you the feeling that you have a license to take anything and everything out of Scripture, right? Well, that's not good. So next thing you know, I became pretty much an atheist, but I wouldn't say that. I would say I was an agnostic, just in case there was somebody up there I didn't want to make him mad. Okay? So, that brings us to our big question as to, well, what can you do? Okay? How can you spread that word without any science background? Okay, that's where we're going to go. And our apologetics team passed out a little flyer for you to take home and share with other people. That's where we're going to head. Okay, let's talk about we went from the flood. We went from Genesis 1 to the flood. Well, if there was the flood, as Genesis 6 says, Noah built an ark. Well, does that ark still exist? Well, let me give you some background info here. We'll ask the expert. There's a fellow by the name of Dr. John Morris that Dr. Sherwin mentioned earlier, made 13 expeditions to Mount Ararat in search for Noah's Ark. All right? Dr. Morris has a doctoral, his doctorate degree in geological engineering from the University of Oklahoma. He joined ICR in 1984. He was the president of ICR from 1996 for 18 years till he had a major stroke. Okay, but he led 13 expeditions to Mount Ararat. Okay, and by the way, he passed away just earlier this year. So why did he take 13 expeditions looking for a boat? Do you think that boat would have survived so many years? Well, I'll let him tell you why he was looking for this boat in certain areas, okay? He had heard story after story after story where all the stories seemed to be the same. And with that many stories by different people who didn't know each other telling the same story, that's what he was looking for.
These are some a sketch of some photographs taken from the U-2 spy plane. Again, a rectangular thing sticking out on the edge of a cliff. Everybody's telling the same basic story. Met a fellow who had done some analysis of photographs in World War II. He had photographs taken in World War II of Noah's Ark, and he was using those photographs actually to calibrate the new Fairchild camera, including Fred Drake here, who claims to have seen the photographs and can sketch what it looked like. And they all sketch the same basic thing. Cliff, ledge, drop-off, rectangular vessel sticking out of the snow, dirt, and other debris covering the remainder of the vessel, he says there. An in view here, he says it's on a ledge, you see. Everybody's telling the same basic story.
Okay, so here's like 4 artist renditions of what they saw or what they heard, what somebody else was describing it to them. Here are 4 more. And so with all the stories being the same, that's the reason that he spent, or he led 13 expeditions up to Mount Ararat. And of course now I know the next thing you're going to ask is, what did he find? Okay, well, he did find quite a few things that look like, potentially look like Noah's Ark. And some of them, none of them, by the way, have ever been confirmed as the Ark. I just want to tell you that right up front. Okay? But some of these were unique enough that they have very specific names. All right? The one in the lower left-hand corner, they've specifically called that one the mystery object. Okay? The one in the upper right-hand corner, they have specifically named that one the unidentified object. All right? But in studying those and blowing up pictures and whatever, they're pretty well convinced that none of these are actually the Ark. Okay? So, but the point is, there's plenty of stories like that, and that's why he went. And why do I tell you those stories? Well, do you think that somebody who has spent or led 13 expeditions to Mount Ararat might have plenty of stories himself to tell? Absolutely. Okay, if you look up at this one here, they're camped way up high on Mount Ararat. The person standing, he goes by JB. The person there sitting down on something, that fellow's name is Roger. Okay, I talked with Roger just a couple days ago. Great guy. Okay, some of those expeditions were kind of cut short, either by the Turkish military or by terrorists, because the terrorists love Mount Ararat because it's a great place to do play their war games. Can you imagine walking along the side of almost a cliff like this with ice, and what would happen if you slipped and how far you would go down? Or imagine walking on boulders and rocks, some of which are this big, and while you're walking, next thing you know, for whatever reason, further up, a whole bunch of them just start sliding, rolling down the mountain at you. And Dr. Morris said, in one particular case, he says it sounded like a huge piece of shrapnel coming at me, and he looked, and there was a rock about that big coming right at his face, and he ducked, and it missed him. He says another time they heard just a horrific noise, and there was a rock like about the size of a Volkswagen coming down at him. Just imagine the stories that he can tell. I have 300 pictures of his from his expeditions to Mount Ararat. I could tell you hours of stories. Okay? But Dr. Morris was a people person. He loved people, and everywhere he went, he was always talking with people. Just a fascinating fellow. Okay? So, but rather than me telling you stories of his Ararat expeditions, let me give you just a short clip of some of his stories, all right? Ready for a short clip?
When a speaker gets up to talk, particularly a guy from out of town that you don't know, there's always one thing he says first. What is it? I mean, he always says, well, I'm glad to be here tonight, right? But nobody ever believes him, right? Well, believe me, I'm glad to be here tonight. And I'll tell you why. If you know anything about the search for Noah's Ark and the various expeditions that have gone over to Mount Ararat to search for Noah's Ark, you know that when they go, it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to come back safely. Well, I've been to Mount Ararat now, I think about 13 times over these last 20 years or so. We've been up and down that mountain, all over that country. We have run into problems over there on Mount Ararat that you just would not believe. Just incredible problems. We've been attacked by wolves. We've been caught in avalanches. We've had narrow escapes with seemingly bottomless crevasses. We've been held at gunpoint many times. We've been thrown in jail several times. We've been shot at a number of times. We got bullet holes in the tents. We got bullet holes in the cars. We got bullet holes in the sleeping bags. We got bullet holes most everywhere. Thankfully, none of us have been shot. I suspect the most dangerous thing that we've ever come in contact with over there on Mount Ararat happened to me and two other fellows as we climbed one day up at about 14,000 feet elevation when, as it turned out, we got caught in an electrical storm. And before that was over, believe it or not, you might not believe it, but it really is true, before that electrical storm was over that day, the three of us were actually struck by lightning.
Can you imagine that? They're at 14,000 feet and struck by lightning. And we have 25 minutes left. Dr. Morris he said he could take his hands and wrap them around his leg, and it was nothing but Jell-O. He could take his hands and just wrap it around the bone. Obviously, he's not walking anywhere. All right. Roger was face down in the snow, blood all around him, and when he did come to a while later, he had no idea who he was, where he was, and why he had a rock climbing axe in his hand. He had no idea. He had total amnesia. JB was convinced he had a broken leg. Okay, so how are we going to get these 3 people down this mountain? So they slowly got things together. Dr. Morris was the first one to be able to actually walk again. And they actually spent the night there figuring, well, we're either going to wake up dead or wake up alive in the morning, but we're going to praise God. We're going to praise God. All right? And they did wake up. All 3 of them woke up alive. In fact, they all 3 woke up pretty much completely healed. And talking to Roger a while back, he said, JB, the only thing he knows that was not fully healed, JB still had a numb spot and a funny spot in the bottom of his foot from that. They stayed on the mountain for another 2 weeks and continued their expedition. Can you believe that? What a story. All right? So, Noah was struck by God to build an ark, right? Dr. Morris was struck by lightning in search for Noah's ark. 2 men separated by history. All right? So that brings us to, well, what can you do to spread this word? The word of creation, that it's true, to people who are being deceived by evolution. Well, what if we made an epic movie series about this? Okay? So let me show you what we call a sizzler reel of a movie series that's in the making, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about that series, what their goal and what their purpose is. Okay? You ready for the sizzler?
Too far! Thought this might be of interest to you.
The Ark. Real page turner.
Just read it, let me know what you think.
I'm here for another matter. I have the other wood, the small timbers, but I need the largest timbers for the interior supports.
No.
Jehovah is God.
Noah.
And He is bringing His judgment to the earth. He's covering it completely with a flood. He commanded me to build this ship. I need those timbers!
You know this!
There it is.
Jehovah owns everything we see. He will provide me those timbers.
Those timbers are mine.
You should have seen their faces when I got to the part about being hit by lightning.
That's always a crowd pleaser.
Maybe we should go back! Get out of here!
John? So when I was struck and I was lying there and I thought that I was gonna die.
But
I heard God say, praise me, praise me.
Yehovah, I feel like I failed you.
don't know what's gonna happen with my MS.
John,
It's bleak.
I feel so lost.
We are not lost. We are together.
I could end up in a wheelchair in a year or so. I could get so bad that I can't provide for you or raise kids.
I wanted to do more.
When I met you, I believed in you. And then because of who you are and how you are, I believed in Jehovah.
So if God has given you the grace to get this far, then He will give us the grace to make this work.
We are in the center of His will. And you are His light in my life.
It took a lot to get here. But by God's grace, here we are.
So, guys, if it's up there, if it's up there and we find it,
Yeah?
what happens then?
We changed the world.
We changed the world!
Okay, what do you think? We're intertwining Noah's life and Dr. Morris's life. They never found the ark, okay? But he still purposed to change the world. Can you participate in that? Can you change the world? Well, yes, in several ways. One, you can pray for this particular project. It's just that it's in its infancy, okay? Spread the word. All of you got one or more of these. Give them to other people. Tell them it's in the works. It's on the way. All right? And then, of course, donate as the Lord leads. If you wanted to write a check, you could write it to 3 Joy Films, and I'll give you a carabiner, which is something that all rock climbers have to have. And on that carabiner, it says struckthemovie.org, okay, .org. Struck the Movie was the original website, and it'll divert you now to Struck the Series for whatever reason it changed. Okay? The series. There's going to be 3 series of 8 episodes each. We're going to draw the young folks in with Dr. John's true stories. As you can see from the short video, he can draw people in. Amazing stories. And then we'll parallel them with the true stories of Noah, right? And in so doing, the building of the ark was a salvation for mankind at the time of Noah, right? So from there, we lead our young folks to the salvation provided by Christ on the cross, right? So that's the objective and the purpose of this movie series. But then the icing on the cake, when you get a gripping DVD or you're looking at something online, do you often go to the extra features? Yeah. Well, the extra features often have a behind the scenes segment, BTS, behind the scenes. Okay. They're going to have BTS, meaning behind the sciences. And so they will be drawing in some of the sciences that you would never, that so many of our students, particularly in public school, never get to see. And just as I showed you 3 areas which are almost like head slappers, where you get the flat forehead, there's numerous things like that we can show from a science perspective. And as Dr. Martin and Dr. Sherwin have already shown you, so many I had never thought about it that way, right? Okay, so no need for science on your part at all. pray for it, the project, spread the word, and if the Lord leads you, donate. Okay, so that's my presentation, and I mentioned that I'd try to get, wouldn't hold you here for too long because it is the last one and don't want to hold you late, but make sure you have these. Give them to your friends. Tell them it's in the works. All right, now it won't be available for probably at least a year and a half. After all, it takes time, a lot of times. Okay, and once again, back to my announcements here. Where was I? What page am I on? This page. The resource tables are still back there. The food is still back there. Donation box still back there. Feel free to talk to Dr. Martin and Dr. Sherwin. Feel free to talk to them or to me. You don't need to rush out. Again, if you don't have a church home, come here tomorrow. Or if you just want to come, you do have a church home and you just want to visit, come here tomorrow. We'd love to have you. 8 o'clock is the first service, 11 o'clock is the second service, 8:30 is the first service, 11 o'clock is the second service, 10 o'clock is the Sunday school hour. Dr. Sherwin would be giving the message at the worship services, and Dr. Martin will be giving some more fascinating stories to over the Sunday school hour. And then just lastly, one thing we do need is, you notice we have all the chairs set up for tomorrow already. That's so we didn't have to do so much work this evening after the sessions. And I want to thank again the chair team for doing that. But because of the tables in the back, we need to move those tomorrow. We need more chair space for tomorrow. So we need to move those tables back to a different room and pull out some other chairs. If you want to hang around for a few minutes and help with that, that would also be greatly appreciated. So, thank you so much again for coming. Love you all.